Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we've got this incredible story about how India built one of the world's most powerful legal frameworks for environmental protection from a constitution that, believe it or not, didn't even mention the environment to begin with.
Okay, so think about this for a second. Here's the massive puzzle India was facing as its industries were booming. How in the world do you protect your air, your water, and your forests when the highest law on the land is completely silent on the subject?
Well, the answer didn't come from politicians passing a bunch of new laws. Nope, it actually came from a pretty unexpected place: India's judges. They got creative and found a really powerful way to read environmental protection into the Constitution that was already there.
All right, let's go back to the very beginning and look at the problem head-on, this giant environmental void in the Constitution.
I mean, seriously, if you were to crack open India's original 1950 Constitution and hit Control F to search for words like environment or pollution, you'd come up with absolutely nothing.
Yup, that's right. The original text had zero explicit provisions for protecting the environment. And as you can imagine, as industrial pollution started to ramp up, this became a massive challenge.
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting. This is the big turning point, where the courts found a hook for environmental rights in a place nobody expected.
The key, believe it or not, was found right here in Article 21, the fundamental right to life. Now, you've got to understand, this article was originally designed to protect people from things like being wrongfully thrown in jail. It really wasn't supposed to have anything to do with trees or rivers, or so everyone thought.
And boom, this quote right here shows you the incredible leap in logic the court made. They basically said, hey, what good is a right to life if the very air you breathe and the water you drink are poisoned? It's a pretty powerful argument when you think about it. A right to life is pretty much meaningless without a healthy environment to live in.
So once this right was established, the courts started to get, well, active. And it all came to a head after a truly horrific industrial disaster. Yeah, this whole idea was really put to the test after a deadly oleum gas leak from a factory in Delhi. In response, the court did something way more than just point fingers and assign blame. They actually created a brand new, super powerful legal tool, something designed to stop a tragedy like this from ever happening again. And this is the absolute kicker. The court invented this brand new principle called absolute liability. And what that means is pretty simple. If your company is doing something hazardous and it causes harm, you are on the hook for the damages. Period. No excuses, no loopholes. This was a total game changer, and it was invented right there in India.
Okay, so armed with this new way of looking at Article 21, the court basically built a whole arsenal of legal principles to enforce environmental protection.
First up, you've got the Polluter Pays principle. The idea is as simple as it sounds. You make a mess, you pay to clean it up. You can't just pollute and then walk away, leaving someone else with the bill.
Next, they brought in the Precautionary Principle. Think of it this way. You don't wait for your house to be on fire before you buy a fire extinguisher, right? If an activity looks like it could cause serious, irreversible damage, you don't need 100% scientific proof to act. The burden is on the potential polluter to prove it's safe. It's the ultimate better safe than sorry legal rule.
And finally, there's the public trust doctrine. This is a really beautiful idea. It says the government doesn't own natural resources like rivers, lakes, and forests. Instead, it's their guardian, holding them in trust for the public. These things belong to all of us, and the state has a sacred duty to protect them for future generations.
Now, all this action from the courts, well, it didn't go unnoticed. It actually pushed the politicians, the legislature, to finally get in the game and write these ideas directly into the Constitution itself.
So, with a push from the courts and some momentum from global events like the big Stockholm Conference in 1972, Parliament passed the 42nd Amendment. And what's so cool about this is how it creates this two-way responsibility. It says, okay, it's the government's job to protect the environment, and it's also the fundamental duty of every single citizen to do the same. It's a shared responsibility.
So where does all this leave us today? What's the legacy of this really unique, judge-led environmental movement?
Well, on the one hand, this whole approach has been amazing. It gives regular citizens a way to stand up and fight for a clean environment. It has been a massive game changer. But, it's not perfect. It puts a ton of pressure on the courts to basically do the job that government agencies are supposed to be doing, and that can lead to some tricky questions about judges maybe overstepping their bounds.
And this story is still being written. I mean, just this year, in 2024, the Supreme Court took another huge step.
they officially expanded that right to life to include the right against the adverse effects of climate change. Just think about that for a second. Climate change is now seen as a direct threat to a fundamental constitutional right.
And that really brings us to the big question, doesn't it? We've seen this Constitution go from being completely silent on the environment to becoming one of the most powerful green documents on the planet, a tool now being used to fight climate change. So as the world faces these huge ecological challenges, you have to wonder, what's the next chapter for India's living, breathing green constitution?